It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of a suitable agency and Sunder Nursery to a wonderful new session of Suitable Conversations at Sunder Nursery. This series of conversations was first inspired by our love for all things books, and a suitable agency is extremely grateful to everyone at Sunder Nursery for their support. And now, for the event we've been waiting for. We are delighted to welcome Abhijit Banerjee back to Suitable Conversations. Abhijit Banerjee won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2019. He's the author of 2 books written with Esther Duflo, Poor Economics, which is the winner of the FT Goldman Sachs Prize, and Good Economics for Hard Times, and 1 cookbook, Cooking to Save Your Life. His new book, Chhaunk, on food, economics, and society, has just been published and is available back there. Cheyenne Olivier is an illustrator based in France. Her books include Cooking to Save Your Life and Poor Economics for Kids. Kaveree Bamzai is a journalist, curator of events, and author of 3 books. She was the editor of India Today and has also worked in Indian Express and Times of India. She is a member of several juries and committees, a graduate of Delhi School of Economics. She is also a Chevening Fellow. Thank you to all 3 of you for being a part of Suitable Conversations. And over to you for our conversation today on Chhaunk, food with a sprinkling of economics. Over to you, Kaveree.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here. It's the best way to spend Saturday afternoon, I think. First, I want to say I've never read a book by an economist which has made me cry.
Thank you.
But a good cry, a very satisfying cry, and that's a very good thing, I think.
Thank you.
You know, there is...
very good sentence.
Yeah. You know, it's a remarkable book in the sense that it's sad and joyous. I think it's written in the shadow of grief, of your mother's passing, and I think Cheyenne, your dad's passing. And the voice in my head, really, after I read this book, is Nirmala Patankar Banerjee telling her son Abhijit, get your elbows off the table. That really is the voice in my head after reading the book. And
You say it so nicely.
I wonder what her darknam for you was. Was there a darknam?
Yes, Jima.
Chima. Oh, of course, which, as all Bengalis know, has nothing to do with their actual, actual name. But it's a remarkable book in the sense that it's actually like, it's a sociology of food. And it has so many ideas, I don't even know where to begin, but I'll just tell you what some of them are. One is food as social power, food, why America has such terrible food, why Bengalis never get rich. The secret is they eat too much and spend too much on food. I'm married to a Bengali, so I understand that. And food critics, that's even worse. So we are very poor. And lots of such ideas, you know, which you think, oh, we never really thought about this. And I think that's one of the remarkable things about this book. I went to D school sociology. So for me, it's really like a sociology a lesson, a master class actually on food. So enough from me. Now to the 2 people who are really, you know, who've done such a remarkable work together. Cheyenne, may I start with you? Because this cover, and please take a look at it very closely. The front cover, can you hear me?
Yeah.
The front cover and the back cover. So the front cover is this person resting under this, I think it's a mango tree. And I mean, he's so happy. You know, he's just drinking his neat pani, I guess. And under the shade of the tree, there's, of course, Amkapan, of course, it has to be. And although your favorite sharbat is falsa, right? So I read this book very closely. So there's a chapter devoted to the idea of rest and shade and why we need to plant more trees. And, you know, then it goes off into another riff altogether about why, about how caravanserais were created and, you know, how water and food was so important. So, as I said, every little idea takes you to a bigger idea. But, so this is, I love this illustration. So I want you to talk about that. And then the second one, which is the back cover, which I think is my all-time favorite. Please look at all the faces there. That's, of course, the diversity of India. But look at their expressions. And I wanted to describe quickly for me why each of them has the expression that they have, including one little girl who has a tongue sticking out, just waiting to pounce on the food. So, Cheyenne, if you could just talk a little about, yeah.
So thank you. I think actually the cover and the back cover are a very good summary for the whole book. So on the cover almost unites the three main themes of all of those columns, all of those essays. There is the theme of Abhijit's childhood memories, I guess, which is very much embodied by the young boy hanging out under the tree. It's very much about food and the mango tree. We go back to mango in many pieces. And a part that is not on the cover, because it was the cover, but we removed it. But there is also a MJ and Rega worker who's also resting under the shade. And that's the part on economics and sociology. So all of the essays are starting from one of these points, and we are trying to balance them so that we go seamlessly, pleasantly from economics to food to Abhijit's memories. So that's for the cover. For the back, I guess the idea is, for me, it was I tried to not bore myself too much by drawing people at the table. So I always try to find different ways of drawing people sitting at the table and interacting. And this one was very much about pan-Indian crowd. And I guess the many different expressions are about what do we do at the dinner table. We are angry, we are happy, we're discussing with each other, there are side looks, the children are roaming around. And this is very much what all the illustrations and the essays are about, is food as a pretext to talk about how we interact in, I guess, economics ways, but also social. It's broader, I guess, than economics there.
Yeah, and Abhijit, all of them have their elbows off the table.
Yes.
So please talk about your mum. She, for me, is the star of the book.
So you're exactly right. My mum is a kind of the overbearing presence in this book, and the absence very felt and always kind of looming. My mum was many things, but among them she was she was a feminist activist, women's rights activist, particularly on gender-based violence and protecting women. We had an NGO in our house, in the ground floor house that she was part of, and so we were always, there was a layer of persistent diatribe on the failings of men, and Indian men in particular, and that we were subjected to, me and my brother. And then, but the other thing she was, despite being extremely busy, because she was an academic, she traveled a lot, and she was an activist. And despite all that, she was also very much someone who, she loved to entertain. So we had, just almost every day, somebody would come. We would end up, for tea or for breakfast or for dinner, somebody would show up. And it's not that we had a lot of money. So it was always this kind of imaginative exercise in how do you manage to feed, an endless phalanx of people who come uninvited sometimes and just stay and eat. How do you feed all of those people? So she was simultaneously figuring that out. How much. So one of the recipes in the book is a shami kebab recipe, and one of the things that shami kebab is really great is you can put a lot of chana dal and a little bit of meat, and it still tastes like shami kebab.
Yeah. And I loved the last meal that you prepared for her, which is that gonto and chola dal.
Yeah.
And the radish, which she didn't, the mooli
which I was going to make her, but she told me that's too much, don't make it. Right. So I didn't make it. She was endlessly bothered by the fact that, I have traveled, why am I cooking? Well, just because I don't actually like sitting and watching TV, so I might as well do something. So there was always this tension between us.
Was she very proud of you boys?
I think so. I think she would have never confessed to it, except maybe
Doesn't
in our
look like it.
absence.
Yeah.
But I think so.
Yeah. So that's why I felt that despite this being so joyful and joyous both, there is that underlying grief and sorrow. And it really looked to me as if both of you were coping with that. And, this was an expression of it.
I would say even beyond that, I think there is a grief for, I think, a world that at least I grew up. Cheyenne is so young, she doesn't, but still, I think the world has many ways crumbled even in her lifetime, not just in mine. And I think that the world, that I think there was a certain amount of, well, many bad things about it. There was a huge amount of poverty. There was a huge amount of, I think, gender discrimination. It's still huge amount of both, but less, I would say, in both cases. Not less enough, but less. On the other hand, there's a lot of, and the book is constantly connecting to sort of the value of social ties, and I think there was a sense in which social ties were easier and more organic and more important in our lives. And I think there's grief for that too. I am nostalgic for certain things about our lives where there was a certain, easy, relationship between communities, and this is not to say that there weren't many forms of discrimination, in some ways caste, in the kind of the middle class Bengali society. Caste doesn't show up so much, but there was caste all around, and there's all forms. But nonetheless, there was at the very superficial, non-social scientist level, there was a kind of a ease to that society where people were, there was not much money, not much to do, not much, like you didn't talk about your trips to fancy places. There was almost, in the book we describe
hesitation, actually, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Inhibition,
Yes, exactly. So there was but that meant that there was also a lot of shared, even small joys were shared. Yes. So there was it's a little bit of a grief for a society that was maybe a little less tense about lots of things.
A little less competitive and a little less hung up about the idea of success.
Yes.
And I think that
exactly,
is very important. And that is again part of the book. One of the most remarkable things about the book is only Abhijit Banerjee can go to Tihar jail and discover bhindi, and what a great what a great food it is. I mean, the idea of dissent. I mean, he went to Tihar jail for dissent. Obviously, he was a JNU and he was part of a protest. But even that, the idea of dissent and celebrating that again is a way of life that we're losing.
Yes, exactly.
The idea that you can go to Tihar jail and discover bhindi for speaking up against the authorities.
Yeah, I think in general, I think the value of dissent, I think we sort of, I think the expectation that dissent needs to be reasonable is unreasonable, in my view. That, dissent is sometimes about expressing emotion. That, this is unfair. I don't like it. It doesn't, once you sit down and think, well, but it's connected to this and this and this and this, you can, our human ability to rationalize is vast. And so you end up, you can always kind of come up with, well, but is it so bad? Because on the other hand, I feel that there is a point where you want to say, bas, I can't stand this. This is bad. And I really do think that there's value in getting upset about things that you see in the world that you don't like. I think as young people, lots of young people here, I think there is real value in letting yourself get upset. because I think that's the only way we'll build a better world.
Yeah.
But I
Share.
think in that sense, the process of doing the columns every month for the last 2.5 years was very helpful, because it's a Sunday morning column. We want to talk about more and more grim topics. We realize that we go from prison to old age to women's
climate change.
So we realize over time that
everything.
we are kind of drawn to more and more grim topics. But in a sense, it forces us to try to find a way also to make it palatable on a Sunday morning, to find some hint of hope. And I remember sometimes we disagreed when I read Abhijit's first draft of the piece, and then we discuss, and we disagreed on the fact that it should not be so grim. There should be not an obvious solution, but at least a hope, a hint where we could go. I think that the process of doing the columns also is very helpful about not precisely staying on the problem.
That's very interesting. A French woman telling a Bengali man to be less grim. I thought it would be the other way around.
Yeah, well, but in economics, we're the dismal science after all. Yeah.
No, but I think but the overpowering idea is, of course, food as social power. Food that tells you where you were, who you are, where you've been, in a way where you're going to. There is so much power in it, which we don't realize. We dismiss it sometimes as just something that we eat, but it really does tell you who you are. And I think that's very interesting. Please talk a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, in a sense, we are exactly in a moment where food is extremely political now, all over the world. In India, on this vegetarianism, meat eating, etc. issues, but all over the world, there's a real. I think many ways. I'm not saying all negative. I think there's some intolerance in India, which is definitely negative. But I think there's also a lot of interesting political engagement with, for example, should we be eating asparagus in December in Delhi?
Should you be eating avocado in anywhere?
Avocado grows in India. So
but very expensive to grow, isn't it?
No,
okay.
Actually no. Okay. Avocado grows on the southwest coast. It does grow.
Right.
But nonetheless, I would say, should we eat asparagus in December? Right. Today or yesterday in the hotel for lunch, they had asparagus. And I was a bit aghast because, it's just, certainly it doesn't grow anywhere close. And this is not the season. Even if it grows, asparagus is a spring vegetable. It doesn't grow now. So it's just somehow this idea that it must have come from Chile or somewhere in this. That's a bit. I think that those kinds of political issues are also worth it. So I would say food is great kind of substrate for moving to whatever you want to move to. You bring in issues. That's why. I mean, maybe I'm going to let Cheyenne tell a little bit of story of why we decided to write these columns, which turned into a book. But that's I think a bit, I think came from exactly that realization. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I guess we realized that a monthly column was a very good exercise because it would allow us enough time to have precisely this set of discussions. The way we write a piece is often 1 month or 2 months before we start thinking about the topic that we would like to explore. Sometimes food is never there, and sometimes it's Abhijit's research. We want to explain a certain point in Abhijit's research, and then we try to extract a food link. So, for example, in one of the columns that is not in this book, but it's I think the November column, we wanted to talk about women's participation in the household chores. And for that, when we started to think about a recipe, that has many, many different steps that you have to do in advance to echo the fact that women often think of not only the main task, but also the micro tasks, and they are constantly mapping out whatever is happening around, what needs to be done in advance, etc. So sometimes it goes this way. And somehow it's almost a game for us. Each month we have to find somehow it's almost very satisfying when we find a topic that is very far from food, and then we come back to food in one sense, because almost all the time in the process some food is had, and so it's also a pleasure of seeing how far can we go in this exercise. And so far we have a list of topics that we want to touch for the next 6 months.
Wow.
It's really
I want to add one thing to that, which is this question of all the micro tasks. So when I was growing up, there was this phenomenon of, Uncle X is going to make his Sunday mutton or whatever. And Uncle X usually did very little of the cooking, of course. Uncle X left all the, not auntie, Shama and Geeta and Rama did all the chopping and cleaning and everything. And then Uncle X would come and, sort of wave his big spoon around and then talk a lot about what he's doing, and then the meat will usually end up, because Uncle X is not so focused, will take 2 hours longer, and we would be very hungry and waiting for Uncle X's meat to be done. It was very much this phenomenon, at least in Bengali families. There was this male meat cooking was a very big thing, and it was always a bit comic, I must say. Even at the age of 6, I thought it was comic, because why can't he just do the work? If he's going to cook, why doesn't he, cut the onions or whatever? No, everything was pre-prepared, and even among the song, okay, I'm done now. You guys watch it, and if necessary, add water, and then Uncle X goes back and listen to the cricket commentary or whatever.
But that brings me to this idea of food as oppression as well, which of course it is for many women. The food itself becomes, and there's a marvelous Malayalam film recently, The Great Indian Kitchen. I think all of you must have watched it. Which,
I haven't watched it.
Yeah, but which really is about this whole food, preparation, cleaning up. It sort of, becomes so oppressive to women. And your mother as well talks about the whole idea of domesticity and Indian women not being able to experience freedom before they get married. I think for her that was a big thing. So food can also be oppressive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And for many women it is. The whole idea of, preparing it. And Bengali food, in Kerala, they're all very complicated, And Bengali food, as you said, if you don't have 4 courses, then it's not worth
not
eating,
a meal.
right? So, which brings us to the other topic of how Bengalis spend all their money on food and therefore have nothing left. And that's why they're so poor. And I was narrating this to my husband, who said, it's called Khai Khai Kangla. I don't know whether that is the right thing, but talk a little about this whole idea.
So I mean, I would say that that's a slight caricature.
A little bit, yes.
Yes. What we were trying to argue is that in the social customs there's often an equilibrium, and the equilibrium comes from it's also true that most Bengalis don't really know, maybe now they do, but traditionally they didn't know any entrepreneurs. I knew some entrepreneurs, but they were usually doing extremely badly, so that was not very helpful. So we didn't have a kind of a role model, we didn't have people who had connections, we didn't have people who could give us a easy loan, and we knew people. Kolkata is, of course, a polyglot city, and in my school there were many people who were Gujaratis and Marwadis in particular, and Punjabis who were going to start businesses. They already told us at 16 that they're going to start a business, and even what business and all those things. So there were, and you could see that they already had role models. They already had some idea of how the funding will come. They had some idea of who's going to help them out and all that. And I think that's actually so the point we were trying to make is that maybe it's sensible for Bengalis to not worry too much about saving up and then starting a business, because it's not clear that it's not by saving up that you really start most businesses. Most businesses, the first thing you do is you go to your conveniently positioned uncle and say, give me a loan, and I start or your father or your grandfather or somebody gives you a bunch of money, then you start a business. I mean, there are people who really start from nothing, but that's very, I mean, I study small businesses as part of my life as an economist, so it's very rare. Most businesses grow out of some, I mean, it's just very hard to build from scratch. So most people businesses grow out of family money of some kind, distant, it doesn't have to be your father, it could be your mother's, brother-in-law or something, but something. There is always someone, a mausa who has some money and who will help you, and that's how it, so in that sense, I think there is no, I don't think it's crazy for a Bengali to think, look, it's unlikely that I'm going to start a business and become rich. So let me just have a good time, spend my money, eat well, travel,
study, do well.
You get a job. I don't think there's anything particularly irrational about that, of saying the good life has many shapes, and you could be rich and have a good life, and you could be just well enough off that you can occasionally travel, perhaps by train, and eat your mache jhol and bhat, and that's also a good life. I think one of the points we're trying to make is that there are many visions of the good life, and that there is a hierarchization of this vision, which didn't used to be when I was a child, but more and more that you have to be an entrepreneur, you have to be rich, you have to have a big house, you have to have many cars. That I think is just destructive. I think it makes more people frustrated, because in the end, not everybody can be the top dog. And I think the fact that there were other things in life that's important, like traveling and reading and watching movies and talking endlessly about movies, and those are all perfectly good ways to live life. So that was the point we were trying to make in that piece.
And of course, that is also because the dining table itself is now disappearing. I mean,
Yes.
It now exists merely as an ornament in most homes, or a place to dump your stuff, because most people are eating in their rooms or in front of the TV. So the dining table, which for you growing up was such an important part of socialization, where you learned table manners, where you learned conversations, where you learned how to actually be. That is actually disappearing around the world, isn't it?
Well, I'm hoping against hope. Our children, I must say, they haven't even imagined that they can get away with the option of not being at the dining table.
Good for them. And they eat with their hands, which is even better.
Yes, they eat with their hands. They say, my daughter even sits with she sits on the chair with her feet up.
Excellent.
And then she eats with her hand, but on the other hand, they take it as a very convenient context for lecturing their parents.
But Abhijit, the idea of the dining table, I think that if you could talk a little more about that, because that really was the fulcrum of so many homes, and that is in itself leading to a certain kind of isolation, even within a family, not even to talk of outside the family. How does that impact the way food is consumed and the way food is thought about?
Interesting. It's a good question. Let me think about. So the drawing that Kaveree showed you, the back drawing, is from that piece on the dining table, and I think that one of the things that I think make there are many things that are important about dining table. One of the things that makes it is that food is also visual.
Yeah.
And if you don't have if you don't dine together, then you miss what is visual about food. So we're very conscious. I mean, one of the things that and this is Cheyenne and I sometimes have these discussions of we should, Cheyenne is actually vegetarian from birth, and she'll tell you more about that, and an artist. So she loves Indian food, and she loves, but she sort of feels that Indian food is often presented in a way that doesn't look so attractive. So a lot of our recent efforts have been to kind of try to see if we can visually present Indian food to be visually more attractive. And I think a table is one of the places where, when the food is really nicely laid out and hot, and there, when I was a kid, there would be like these stainless steel things, and they will all have nice covers and like floral covers and all that. You take it off, and then you see all the food, and the dal would have something floating, some nice dhania floating on it or something. So I think that I think the visual aspects are lost. Once you don't have a table, it's all kind of we come and eat, then there's no that drama of unveiling the food or inviting people to the table, see what the meal looks like, goes away. You want to take that?
I think I'm French, so the dining table is a huge, and dining all together at the table is a really huge institution. You really can't go around it. We can spend 1 hour, 1 hour and a half at the table. It's really something you don't want to miss. But I would say that actually what we try to do in many of the pieces, and especially in the illustration, is precisely to, for me it gets a bit boring if I always represent a dining table. I can represent it in many different ways, but we also try to show how people can eat in the train, on their way to work, coming back from a cricket match, how they can eat on the street, in a park. So we also try to vary that, I guess in a jail in particular. But we are always mindful, precisely this book and this set of columns is precisely to show how food is not just at this particular moment where you all gather together for dinner. It's also, it's across the day, it's across your space, I guess, so we are.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you talk about is a train journey where you had this roti and this sabzi. Please narrate that.
This is a Bengali versus. So I'm half Maharashtrian.
Yeah.
So that's and this is the one very sharp difference between Maharashtrian culture and Bengali culture is Bengalis like to eat 80% of the calories from other than grains.
Yes.
At least Bengali, middle class Bengalis, you can afford it. We have, 3 kinds of vegetables, dal, fish, and then the roti or the chawal is
always and something talk and something sweet. Has to be
sweet, some chutney which is sweet and sour, and some.
According to him, a kitchen that has no chutneys is not worth talking about.
There's that too. Pakoras. So whereas in Maharashtra it's always, we have to not waste money. We should, be frugal. So you eat one roti with a tiny bit of vegetable. So I was in a train, and some very nice man gave me some roti and sabzi, but a lot of roti and little sabzi. And being unmindful, I ended up first finishing all the sabzi. Then I had to eat 4 rotis without anything, and I was okay. Now what do I do? So conveniently, the train stops in a station, and I tell him, okay, I'm going to go get some fruit. And I run out of the train, and I somehow dump the roti somewhere, and I come back with some fruit. And that was my, that's the story that's in that.
Which also brings us to the idea of train journeys. And train food used to be such a major part of my growing up. I can still taste that chicken curry of the Rajdhani from Delhi to Calcutta, It had that special taste which is very difficult to replicate.
It's a railway curry is a recipe.
Yeah, railway mutton curry, chicken curry
is a recipe.
Yeah,
it's specific to and you can actually Google railway mutton curry and you will get a recipe. I have actually never tried it, but
so
yes,
one idea
for the future. But it's but also we would plan the entire journey's whole arc.
Yeah.
What you eat when you get on to the next morning, and then in the next afternoon. And it was a whole, it was part of the excitement of travel.
Yeah, and I think it was also the way it was all quite democratic. I mean, the person sitting next to you was not of your choosing. He or she could be anyone. I think those train rides, those bus rides, what you said, it was a way of life that taught us to live with each other in greater harmony, because you couldn't choose your neighbor, you couldn't choose your the person who was with you in school sitting next to you, but this increasingly privatization of your homes and spaces.
Yeah,
so that again is a way of life that's getting lost, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's and one of the points we keep coming back to in the book is this idea that our social networks are traditionally social networks were created from just whoever happened to be around. It was not you didn't get, because people didn't go to elite colleges or something. You didn't build social networks out of those things. You built social networks out of, whoever happens to be around. And there was hierarchies within that. It was not that, so, people who had money, they would have, a lot of people would just come for a meal, mostly because they couldn't afford to have all the meals, and they would not be, and there was clear hierarchy there. People would, not in our house, but in my aunt's house, there would be a paterfamilias who was, whose voice you could hear a lot, and who was, who was clearly, and the sort of the people who were kind of being accommodated. Sometimes they were from the village and they came and stayed. They would be a little bit, in the shadows, but still, as kids, we played cricket with them. So there was a broader social spectrum that we were immersed in. I played cricket with all the slum children in our neighborhood, in fact, and they were all better at cricket than me. But nonetheless, I played with them, and that was a part of also the becoming who you are. You learn what you do. The poor are not some abstract thing that's out there. They are part of, because of that particular structure. We had a lot of connections to very different kinds of people.
So that's the other remarkable thing about the book, the humanity in it and the humaneness of it, you don't expect that usually from economists, but I know you're a different kind of economist.
Thank you.
But
I'll pass it on to my colleagues.
But it really, I suffered 3 years of studying economics. But that humaneness, I think that is something that you write about as well. How economists themselves have started looking at human behavior in a different way. And that is something that you're very approving of. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll say something. There's a whole, I think one thing that was sort of, when I started studying economics was kind of a, in a sense, it was a much more of a kind of normative exercise. You just say, rational people ought to do this, rather than people do this. And people often don't do things what quote-unquote rational people are supposed to do.
Yeah.
People behave the way they want to behave. And one of the, I think, very positive things that's happened in economics is this idea, this whole development of this field of behavioral economics, which is really recognizing that human beings behave the way they behave. And there's some logic to it, but the logic is not the logic of, abstract rationality. It's the logic of, how to live your life. And I think that's very important, that change in economics.
Yeah, and very welcome.
And very welcome.
Yeah, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I would say that I guess that's why also the essays are illustrated, because we very much want to bring up scenes and peoples and character, and many of the essays come out of Abhijit's personal story or other story that we hear that we hear sometime at the dinner table. So it's very much about that, and it's if I can speak for it, it's always on the also on the margins of economics. There are many pieces that are built around, for example, the anthropologist Marcel Mauss on the gift. Sometimes for the Uzbek piece, Abhijit made me read pieces on, I guess, the history of economics. So it's always a bit on the side, on the edge. And what is interesting is food in human, and then we try to connect it to.
Actually, the word for it, I think, is playful. It's a very playful book, you know. There's a lot of.
That's a kind word.
There's a very playful quality to it.
Because it is done in a playful way. We never come up with something that is built, because most of the challenge is to make it appealing. Whenever there is too much statistics, we realize that this does not make a good story. So we reread the pieces many times. It comes up as a good story.
I love some of his descriptions. He says the Mari biscuit is the empress of bland, and the gulab jamun is something of excess. The empress of excess, or something like
Epitome
that. Epitome of excess. Very nice alliteration. But I love that Mari biscuit thing, which I quickly want to also bring you to American food, and he seems to hate it. You seem to actively hate it. And, you know, he talks about the idea that there are countries that produce a lot, and usually their food is wonderful, like India or Italy. America produces a lot, but it produces big amounts, not edible or tasty amounts. That's a very interesting idea again, and you know, it brings in so much of how we farm and how we store and how we consume.
So I think that what's interesting, exactly, America is kind of the exception. If you think of the countries that with great cuisines, they have great produce.
Great produce.
All of them, basically. France, Italy, Spain, China, Thailand, they all have great produce. I mean, that's one of the things, a very, very simple prediction. But it's like great, America has potentially great produce and has bad food. And that's what, the question is, why does it have bad food? And this is a exercise in speculative social science, and the answer.
But it's so fun, so much fun. It should be a separate
speculative social science.
They should teach it.
Yes, a whole. I will lose my job, but other than that, but I think that one of the ideas we suggest is, I mean, what's interesting about America, and the history is actually widely documented. So people from Europe, most people who moved to America from Europe were poor.
Yeah.
They were, Irish who were starving. They go to America, and they write letters to their family saying, "My God, here you can eat real meat every day, not gristle, not just the bones. You can eat real meat every day." So I think this idea that the fulcrum of the meal should be access to as much meat as you like is sort of has built, and then as much cheese as you like. So you get the Neapolitan pizza, which is a thin piece of bread with a smattering of cheese and lots of flavoring agents. And then you do the deep dish Chicago pizza, which is, you step into it, your foot will get stuck. I mean, they're so thick and so sticky. And, there's so much cheese in it. There is a sense in which these are just different conceptions of the same thing. But it comes out of the fact that, a certain kind of plenty of milk in America, which is turned into extreme. In Europe, you spend, 18 months aging cheese. In America, you get a factory and you produce cheese in 3 days, but the cheese has no taste. And then you can melt, 500 grams of it on a pizza, and you get into this cheese soup on a pizza. It's just, there is a sense in which excess is a problem, and availability is a problem. And it's important one to remember, because in India now we're also going through a revolution, poultry revolution. So in Bengal, for example, farm fish revolution. And that means that you're getting a lot of these things, and that's at some level fine. It's people need nutrition, but it's also the case that as a result we forget that a lot of the foods that were driven by need, for example, the many greens that we eat in Bengal. If you go to a market, you'll see there are 15 types of greens at any point. Sag. They were just leaves that people picked out and figured out this one needs to be cooked in this way and that one needs to be cooked in that way. But it's delicious as a result, and we are sort of losing that awareness of what was excess. In a sense, also crowds out an awareness of how to be creative within limits.
Yeah, and you in fact refer to this paradox of choice, that sometimes you end up not choosing because there's so much.
Exactly.
And coming from a country which went through so much shortage in the 70s and 80s, and you lived through that era, the idea of gas cylinders running out, and we having to cook on kerosene stoves. I don't even know whether people now have seen a kerosene stove. But it was so,
there's nothing good about kerosene.
Exactly. But that idea of shortage actually makes you more creative. Have you seen it in your work as well?
In my work,
Yeah.
I mean, the idea, I mean, that's an idea in economics that's, as an economist, that idea is not novel. I mean, we often have this idea that, a particular resource constraint, when a particular resource runs out, you actually innovate technologies to make it, to solve that problem. So I don't think it's for an economist, it's not a novel idea. I think what I'm trying to more insist is it's very relevant for food. The way we eat is very much conditioned on that.
And just the last question before I open it out to the audience. The idea of reimagining our public spaces. We're in a wonderful public space, which really is the kind of space that you grew up in and the kind of space that you're advocating, Let's have more trees, and let's have the right trees in the right places. Not your asparagus that comes from who knows where. The carbon footprint is better. Everything is better. Talk a little about why we need to do that in India, in the India that we're living in.
I'm going to let Cheyenne start on that, and then I'll finish. You have nothing to say? You constantly talk about... I thought you would talk about the locavore movement.
So I guess I come from a family. They had one of the first organic stores in Paris in the late 70s, 80s, and now part of my family has organic stores in Brussels. So we grew up vegetarian, right. And we grew up being extremely focused on the right food, the right nutrient, and the right season, and eating wild. We would go in the forest and gather wild plants and how to cook them and all that. So I come from I guess, almost too extreme family in that sense. We were talking earlier about how food can exclude. So sometimes part of my family would come with a whole truckload of food, which I found very insulting, because then they can, it's really insulting as a host. Right. But it has something, it has something true to it, which is you can, it's probably better for your health and for the environment, but I guess I'm more mild on that precisely because I come from a very extreme.
Yeah, I wanted Cheyenne to talk about the trees and the plants, because I want to talk about inclusive public spaces. I think one of the things that we in Delhi is a prime example of how much of the public space is not public. It's colonies, and if you don't look like the right kind of person, you can't go into the park. And
now you have OTPs that you need to give at a gate to even
excellent
certain colonies to even get in.
Technology all the way.
Really excluded
all the way. So exactly. So that I find that in general the idea. I mean, you go to Dwarka or Rohini, and there's just dusty streets. There's no public spaces where kids can play.
No benches, no public.
It's really, and I think that's actually a crime against children.
So, questions. Please do keep them short and introduce yourself as well. Yeah. Who's going to decide? Me? Okay. And then that lady there. Yes, please.
Namaste, Abhijit sir. I hope your life is as beautiful as the meaning of your name. My simple question, which person, which place, or any event in your life that you would refer to as the Chhaunk in your life?
Nice one. Nice question.
Many, actually. You know, I'm one of my, I would say one of my great privileges in life has been I've always made friends, and I've always made friends, you know, not just when I was 5, but even when I was 60 as well. So I make friends easily, and I become close friends with them. And that's the Chhaunk in my life. The friends are my Chhaunk.
By the way, who gave this name? You? Really?
That's the first thing about Indian cooking that Abhijit taught me. The first time we went to India, he taught me how to make palak paneer. I guess he wrote the recipe on WhatsApp and sent it to me, and I tried to make it for my friends in Strasbourg, and I completely burnt the Chhaunk 2 or 3 times, and then I asked Abhijit what was I doing wrong, and so he told me about the fact that it should really be a small amount, and then we thought that
and you have to cook it for 30 seconds, not 3 minutes.
Yes, no, exactly. But we thought it was a good,
very
both
nice.
has a great
so beautiful.
onomatopoeia. But also, it was really echoing what we want to achieve with the columns, which is to spark some idea, not go too long, too deep, but really spark a thought, a conversation about any different topic.
And it cannot be translated.
Exactly. But it sort of closes to a spice up something, and we want to spice up conversations.
It certainly does. Yes.
Hi, Abhijit. I'm Preeti Davra. I work at the President's Office in Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, NTU Singapore. And I wonder what first of all, I think this idea of Chhaunk is exactly approximately which Meera Nair calls in her book About Time. But what is your sense of lab-grown food now that this new experiment in places like Singapore that don't have their own food? Do you think that's a positive step?
Sure. I think that there are lots of foods we cannot afford to have in large quantities. The environmental costs are vast, and I don't see why we wouldn't try. I mean, food has to taste good, and unfortunately, many of the innovated lab-grown foods I don't like. But nonetheless, yes. This meat substitutes, I've tried many of them. So far, I haven't liked any. I don't eat so much meat, so it's not a huge part of my life, so I don't need to actually fight this fight too much. But nonetheless, I think that for a lot of people who eat a lot of meat, the environmental costs are large. I see no reason not to try. And it will work. Eventually, it will work.
Yeah, that gentleman.
Hi, sir. So my question is when we talk about food, so there is this whole concept of home food, like we grow up eating. And then we talk about tasty food outside home. There is this whole concept of street food, which is like available to the masses and it's really tasty. And then there is this whole extreme case of Michelin star restaurants, which is like charging like maybe 100 and 1000x of what we usually eat. So like, what's your take on that? Like any observation you have?
You know, I think the observation of the fact that, I think that one of Singapore was mentioned. I'll give it as an example. One thing that Singapore is a extremely unequal society also, but with food, they have a certain democracy, which is striking. It's one place where, because the street food is very well regulated, even the rich in Singapore eat in the same street food market as the poor. And the reason is that it's safe. You won't get sick. The regulations are so. I do think that that's a very nice thing, because you eat elbow to elbow with somebody much poorer than you or richer than you, and that's a wonderful thing. It's one democratic space, and I think we could create it. We just need to. And then Cheyenne would agree to eat street food. She ate it once and got sick and refuses to eat it.
But I think also this celebrity culture, the chef culture, you talk about it, and he says he can never run a restaurant because he can't even delegate in his own kitchen. But the idea that you need a team to work in a restaurant, and the culture of the celebrity chef, it's become so big now, right?
So this
on
idea
this
comes
one,
from Shay.
I launched this topic because my sister is a pastry chef and she has worked in many palaces in Paris and in France, in very fancy places, and sometimes places that were very well advertised. They had a great Instagram. They were showing how they would go in the forest and pick the season.
That movie, with Ray Fiennes.
They would only pick the seasonal produce, etc. But the culture was very masculine. They would be badly paid. So she keeps trying different jobs because sometimes it's a only women team, but it's actually sometimes worse than a mixed team. And for her, she's being trained as a extremely good pastry chef in Paris in the top school, but it bothers her also that the food she produces is also accessible for only a few person, and that the culture also in the palaces is so bad.
Tell her to come to India. Sorry.
She's coming to India in the end of January.
Oh, so
she'll try Mishti in Kolkata.
Oh, yes, there are lots of hands there, please. Yes.
I'm Sheena Jain, and I'm a sociologist, but I also eat. And,
you also eat? Amazing.
Yes,
amazing.
Believe it or not. Yeah, I'm glad you realized that. But I was reminded so many times when you were speaking about the work of Bourdieu on taste, you know, how it's mediated by class. And also, I felt your notion of economics incorporating the irrational doesn't mean throwing away the rational. I mean, what about information? Like, we're all entrepreneurs in Bengal, Marwaris and Punjabis. What about the Bengali? That there were many important industries, Bengal chemicals and so on. They were owned by Bengalis. And I did find a very distinct class bias in your depiction of different cuisine, Indian cuisine. I mean, I'm just responding as a sociologist, perhaps, more as a, and also as somebody who eats. I think the visual dimensions of Indian food, you miss in a way. I mean, I think there's a lot of beauty in the way, cuisine is presented in different parts of the country. I mean, I could go on, but it stimulated a lot of questions and also, critique, perhaps. And I'd like others to join in if I'm wrong about it being biased, in terms of class.
I would not have said, I think the two things you say, I don't fully understand how they fit together. I would say yes. So I think the point I was making was about, if you read the chapter, is about people who went to school with me who had middle class backgrounds or even upper middle class backgrounds in some cases. And for them, I think there was a clear choice between being an entrepreneur or not. If you take people who have no entry into the formal labor market, either because they don't have the right education or they don't have the right social connections. The social networks are very important for getting jobs in factories, for example. For them, being an entrepreneur is absolutely not because they want to be. I did a survey many years ago, and I asked many people in the survey, what would your child or grandchild, what would you want him to be? And I feel, I think 85% said they wanted a government job, and I think 15% said they wanted a private sector job, 0% said entrepreneur. So I think entrepreneurship is, in the sense of being a desirable thing to do, as you mentioned, Bengal Chemical. Bengal Chemical didn't come out of the, somebody from the, whatever, lower, from somebody poor, came from a fully elite project. And most of the, if you think of ISCO, these are all elite projects. I feel that that's more, and the question is, why did that change? And what happened to the elite projects? In 1830s, Bengal is kind of at the cutting edge of Indian entrepreneurship. Why does it go down? That's the interesting question to me.
A lot of it has to do with colonialism.
Yeah. I mean, very deliberate interventions to destroy Bengali industry.
Hello. Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Banerjee. I'm Ishani, right, center right. Can you see me?
Right is a political position.
I'm not from that part. I'm not from there. So in one of the episodes of Ronna Ghare Ke, if you remember, you talked about this one fruit called pomelo. And you have such great citrus Gondoraj in Bengal. Why don't you talk about some of those recipes? I'm really interested.
There is actually a pomelo salad recipe, but not in this book. In the previous book, we had a pomelo salad recipe. I use pomelo all the time. For example, with sprouted mung, pomelo, sliced chilies, and chaat masala, you can make an extraordinarily good salad. Proper juicy pomelo with sprouted mung. The sprouted mung has a slight bitter and nutty taste, and then you add, your favorite chaat masala, which you can make or buy, and then some thinly sliced green chilies. That's a salad I love, the pomelo, and so that if you want a quick recipe, I would say try that one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Hello. So, sir, I'm Aman. I'm from FMS Delhi, MBA college nearby. So, sir, my question is about the access and technology you talked about. So, like, we don't have now kerosene, like, chulas, nowhere. We have CNG, we have microwave. At the same time, the phone is eating the dining table out. So, do you think in economic sense, we see, like, march of technology, broadly positive, increase in efficiency? In, like, kitchen, how do you see this technology coming in?
It's a very good question. I wouldn't say much of technology. I mean, right now I'm absolutely frightened by AI. So I'll use this as an excuse to talk about AI. I'm very frightened. I can't see how much of the BPO industry in India will survive just because the skill sets of the people who are in the BPO industry, I think they are going to be easily replaceable by AI. I mean, if it's, doing very simple animation or transcribing medical prescriptions, I just don't see how, or simple accounting, AI is going to take all those things. So I think my friends in the BPO industry tell me that there are other jobs, but I don't know how many people will be able to get those jobs. There'll be other jobs. AI will create its own jobs, and some of the people who are going to work with AI will be extremely productive and will become extremely successful, but I don't know how much. So that's a very good example, I think, right now to worry about.
Thank you, sir.
We have been told just 2 more questions, so I think there's some hands up here.
There's one there and one here.
Yeah, one there. Hello, Abhijit sir. Right here. Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ritika Chakraborty.
Okay.
I'm having my dream moment, first of all. So, the first thing is I'm from Miranda House, and it's my very first year in Delhi.
Okay.
And being a Bengali, we have that emotion that Mayer Hater Khabar and then Alu Chhara Biryani. So my question will be, what is that one thing that you miss the most away from home, away from Kolkata, and away from our heart, India?
Oh, there are different things. I mean, I think I'll just answer the Kolkata part of it.
Yes, sir.
I think what I really love about Kolkata is, you walk in the street, you smell food. and different flavors, people putting the chhaunk on the dal, or the pakoda being fried, or the, it's just, I mean, Delhi is just not a walking city. So you can't really smell food in Delhi because I mean, partly the air is so bad you can't smell anything, but other than that, you can smell food. I really love the idea of, you pass a halwai and you smell the frying of the jalebi. There's just so many different kinds of smells in Kolkata. Some of them awful also, rotting vegetables, but still, overall, I miss that.
I thought you would say khichdi because there's a pain to khichdi in it.
Khichdi is, I don't have to miss. I can make khichdi.
Yeah.
I make many khichdis. Yeah.
Hello.
No, I think, yeah.
So my question is, we can see students now from engineering background getting into economics. So do you think that economics is getting more into tech-based, using its philosophical aspect? Another.
It was unfortunately lost in many years ago.
And another question is, other than...
No, they gave someone else. You had your chance.
Thank you. There was
Yeah.
Who was that? Yeah.
I'm Yogini, and I'm a Maharashtrian who stays in CR Park, so I kind of relate to what you said about I just wanted to ask that, food and cooking and gender is very much related. Most girls grow up with the pressure that, they've got to learn to cook. I reluctantly like to cook much later in my life, which I enjoy. I wanted to ask, how was your experience of, say, firstly learning to cook and then cooking? How did you sort of and cooking?
Okay. I quickly answer that. I learned to cook because I'm super greedy. Not unlike other people who are just greedy. My mother used to travel a lot, and when she traveled, the quality of the food in the household went down. And we had a cook. He would cook, but he cooked pretty, routine Bengali stuff. So I decided at some point that I could do what interesting things that my mother made, I could also make. It was not entirely true, but nonetheless, it was true enough that I could keep going with that idea.
Thank you so much. I think it's been a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And I think I can see Nirmala, Patanka, and Banerjee up there smiling at you and the person you've become. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you, Kaveree. Thank you, Cheyenne.